Well, good morning, everyone. I know the conversation was getting up there. I'm sorry to stop you all, but it's time to get started. Um, Thank you, everybody, for joining us this morning. For this month's topic, we have traction, and we're going to listen to Jeff Whittle talk about the EOS component. So I also want to introduce our partners for the Bold Speaker Series, which is Texas Security Bank, Sean Cass. But really quick, just a few reminders. At the end of the presentation, we're going to have a poll. It's just one question. So if you guys stay towards the end, please answer that for us. And also, if you have any questions, please submit those in the chat feature and we will hand those off to Jeff as he ends his presentation. But we're going to hand it over to Sean. Thank you for being our Bold Speaker Series partners. And he's going to give some remarks and introduce our speaker for today.
Well, good morning, everyone. It was a great conversation, and Andrea might have done us all a favor by cutting it off. I don't know. But I'm super excited to be here this morning. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Sean Cass. I'm Executive Vice President with Texas Security Bank. We're a locally owned community bank serving business owners and operators all over the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And so I'm super excited to co-host this series with the Garland Chamber of Commerce. And I'm even more excited today to introduce a friend of the bank and a great guy to talk about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, which is traction in the entrepreneurial operating system. So without any further ado, I want to introduce our speaker today, Jeff Whittle. Jeff Whittle is the founder of Whittle Partners, a Dallas entrepreneurial operating system-based consulting firm dedicated to helping entrepreneurs, owners, and leadership teams build better businesses. Jeff practiced law in Dallas for 15 years, and he has an additional 20 years of executive business experience. He's run businesses ranging from startups to 300 employee operations. In 2012, Jeff was named by the U.S. Department of Commerce to the National Board of Examiners for the Malcolm Baldrige Performance Excellence Award. He is certified in strategic business leadership coaching, board facilitation, and mediation dispute resolution, and is one of a handful of people designated by EOS worldwide as a certified implementer for EOS. And so without any further ado, I want to introduce Jeff Whittle. And Jeff, the stage is yours. Take it away.
Thanks, Sean. Really appreciate it. And I want you guys to know there's one reason I'm here, and it's not just to share EOS with you and meet you. It's because I'm a huge fan of the bank. I'm a customer, been a customer for a long time. And you just can't ask for a better financial partner. So Sean, I'm flattered that you asked me to do this and really excited about our relationship. Thank you. Let me share my screen with you so that hopefully you can see the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Does everybody see that? Great. I'm going to share it this way. If I present it, it's going to fill up my whole screen and I won't be able to see any of the people. The reason I want to see everybody is if you do have a question, if you want to ask something, that's fine. This doesn't have to be a lecture. So just wave your hand and I'll try and keep my eye on you so I can see if you have a question, but there will be time for some questions at the end as well. So I am, as Sean said, a certified implementer for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's outlined in a book you may have read called Traction, written by Gino Wickman, who's now a good friend of mine. There are hundreds of EOS implementers around the world, and more than 10,000 businesses have been running on EOS now for the last 10 years. And so this is not a test. It's something that we're trying to figure out as we go. As Sean can tell you, the bank runs on the Entrepreneurial Operating System. They do a great job. And my job today is just to introduce it to you and answer any questions that you have in hopes of helping you run your businesses better and more effectively. That's what I'd like to get done today. So let's jump right in. When we talk about an entrepreneurial operating system, the first question is, what is a system? People sometimes go, why do I need a system for making my business work? And it's important to think about what a system is. It's a set of tools and things that work together. And it's a mechanism that connect and form a set of principles and procedures by which something's done. And so think of an operating system for your business just as you would an operating system for your computer. There are a lot of things that are going on, but the operating system is that architecture. It's the framework. It's that thing at the base that holds everything together and allows things to communicate. And so this is what the EOS model looks like. EOS is the shorthand that we use for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a model that gets your business strong in 6 fundamental areas, and we'll talk about each of them real quickly. It starts with vision. We want to make sure the businesses are clear on where they're going, how they're going to get there, and most importantly, that everybody in the business is aligned on that vision is shared by everyone. We then have tools that allow you to answer the question, do we have the right people in the right seats? You've heard that 1,000 times. You have to have the right people in the right seats. And when I was running businesses, I just wish I knew what that meant. We try and give you tools that help you answer that question. There's a data component to EOS. Are we measuring the right things, both from a people standpoint and from a data standpoint? We'll talk about that very briefly. There's a very powerful component of the system around issues. And you might think, well, gosh, what's special about an issue? And in an EOS world, issues are the tools that we use, first of all, to capture the things that we need to decide or the opportunities that we take advantage of. And then there's a system and a protocol for actually solving them rather than just kicking cans down the road, as many businesses will do. There's a process component. Do we know how we do what we do? And does everybody do it that way? And then finally, there's a traction component. Are we staying clear on our short-term priorities? And do we have an appropriate meeting rhythm so that everybody stays connected over the course of the days, weeks, quarters, months that we work together? So that's the model. And when I tell you that it's agnostic, I really want you to understand that it is industry agnostic. These are some of the companies that I've worked with, and you can see that there's a range, everything from professional services companies to publishers, franchisors, franchisees, oil and gas companies. And my point in showing you this is to help you understand this was not designed to run a particular kind of business. It's a format for any business. And so you can see the wide range of different groups that use these tools. It all starts with how do we decide where we're going to go and how we're going to get there? And historically, when I was running businesses, this was the way we had always done it. We'd get together, we would find out how we'd done, we would track our performance, we would look at the past, we would think about our history, and then we'd look at where we were, and we'd simply ask, okay, based on this history and where we are, what do we think we can achieve in the coming year? And that was typically the method that we used. We've got a 1-year budget. We're going to hit that budget. We always grow by 10%. We got to figure out how to grow 10% again this year. That's the way I was raised to do planning. And in EOS, we do it really differently. We start with the question, where are we going? What does success look like? How are we going to define what our goals truly are? And from that point, we can assess, okay, what's our starting point? And then what do we have to do to achieve that goal? So it's a forward thinking model. And we look to the future and work backwards to ask ourselves, what are the things we have to be doing now in order to achieve those goals? I think this is the next screen. So when we talk about vision and where we're going, we're going to answer 8 simple questions. Core values, who are we? Core focus, what do we do and why does it matter? 10-year target, that's our where are we going? What's our marketing strategy? How can we get people to understand why we can help them and to help them choose our business? What's our 3-year picture? What do we think our business is going to look like in just 36 months? And the reason we do that is to help us answer the next question. What have we got to be working on right now, this year, and then rocks this quarter? And then finally, what are the issues that we're dealing with that can either help us get where we're going or that we have to overcome in order to get there. First of all, before we go charging ahead, any questions at all about just the model, the 6 areas where we hope you can get strong with your business? If not, we'll keep pushing. Core values is the first of the 8 questions. And, you know, we all grew up hearing core values and seeing them on posters in break rooms. And they were all just sort of happy words that made us feel good about our business. And we believe core values are a very, very different component in your business. It answers the question, who fits in my business? You know, if you think about core values, these aren't just words that we try and say because it makes us feel good about our business. We think core values defines the right people for your organization. These are the words that we use to make sure that we're bringing the right people in, to find the ones who don't belong, to reward and recognize people. And so we walk you through a process to answer that. What is the non-negotiable language of behavior in my business? And it's different for everyone. It typically comes from the top. It comes from the leader. And so what we try and do is understand, you know, what are those core descriptors for the leaders of the business, so that we can use those descriptors then to find people who are like us, people who are going to fit in our world. So that's core values. We then answer the question, what's our core focus? And that may seem very simple, but you'd be surprised how many businesses have a core focus that says, we're going to chase just about every opportunity we can think of so that hopefully we can make some money. And that's not very focused. We ask you to be clear on what is it that you can be world-class at, that your business can be just wildly successful, that you can do better than anybody else. And we also ask you to answer the question, so what? Why does it matter? You know, why is it important? And the reason we ask that question is because that's your mission. You hear people talk about mission statements. Simon Sinek is a very well-respected author. He wrote this book about questions asking why, you know, what's your why? And your why is the reason people follow you. Your why is the reason people want to work for you. It's the mission. It's that dent that you're making in the universe. And then we use that as an opportunity filter. As things come forward and you have the chance to decide, I've got finite amounts of money and people, am I going to invest it in this or that? Well, if you know what you can be world-class at and you know why it's important, that allows you to make much better decisions about that. So that's core focus. From there, we ask you, where are you going? What does success look like? You know, what is this thing trying to accomplish, this business of yours? Yeah, you want to make a living. You want to feed your family. You want to do something good. But what are we building here? And we're trying to get people focused on this big, giant opportunity that they're chasing in their lives. You see here, it says NASA, figure it out. Some of us on the call here are old enough to remember back in '63 when John Kennedy stood up and he said, by the end of this decade, we're going to put a man on the moon. We're going to bring him home safely. And everybody clapped, except the people at NASA. Everybody at NASA looked at each other and just wondered, how are we going to do that? They had no idea how they were going to do it. But that's the beauty of a 10-year target, is it gets you out of that constraint of thinking about, well, what do we know how to do right now? And it challenges you to answer the question, where are we going? And then figure it out. And Kennedy knew, and great leaders know, that if they come up with really amazing, inspirational long-term targets, their teams will figure it out. And so that's why we ask you to come up with that 10-year target, because it completely changes your thinking, the paradigm about what are we going to do next. It's no longer about we're going to put one foot in front of the other. It's about we're going to chase this big, giant thing. So that's the value of a 10-year target. The next question in the vision component is our marketing strategy. Are we clear on who we can help? You know, nothing magic here. We ask you to define your target market. We want to know where they are geographically, what they look like demographically, You know, how big are they? Are they companies? Are they individuals? Are they people? Or they have certain critical mass of size of employees or dollars? And finally, psychographically, what's important to them? What pain are they in? What do they need? So that's our target market. And then we simply differentiate our business by coming up with something we call 3 uniques. Very simple mechanism to differentiate. What can we say about our business that's true, that resonates with that target market, and that differentiates us from any of our competitors? And so those 3 uniques become the marketing message, the drumbeat that we're always using as we describe our business. There are 2 other components to the marketing strategy. Number 1, do we have a guarantee or some pledge or some promise that we can make to our customers and our prospects that will help them feel comfortable about choosing us? And then finally, do we have a proven process, a mechanism that we can show them that they can feel comfortable? They know that we've been around this block before. We're not experimenting on them. We can show them physically, here's what it's going to look like to have a relationship with my business. So those are the 4 components of marketing strategy. And that's really the vision component. From there, we move into, all right, from a traction standpoint, how are we going to get there? First question we challenge you to ask is, as we're on the path to this 10-year target, what's our business going to look like in just 3 years? What's our best guess at the kind of business we're going to be dealing with 36 months from now? What markets will be in? How many employees are we going to have? What roles will people have? What does our revenue look like? What technology infrastructure do we need? How many facilities? And the reason we're doing this is not just so that we can take wild guesses at what we think the future holds, but because we know for a fact that as you start thinking about where you're going to be on this journey, you're going to have really good ideas about what the future will look like. And that allows you to then answer the question, what do we need to be working on right now? What are the most important things if we're on this path to be this company 10 years from now? What do we need to be working on this year? What are our profit commitments? We don't call them goals, we call them commitments. What are our revenue commitments? And then finally, what are the 5 to 7 most important things that we have to get done this year? I don't know how many of you have seen strategic plans before that are 50 pages with Gantt charts and all these different things. You're going to do 100 different initiatives and you break them out, and that's great, but that's way too complicated. And the EOS is just about simplicity. We simply ask the question, what are the 5 to 7 most important things that we have to get done this year? It's not the only stuff that we'll work on, but at the expense of other things, what are those critical commitments that we're going to make this year? And you answer that question much better if you've already answered the question, well, where are we going 10 years from now? What's our goal? And 3 years from now, what's my business going to look like? All of a sudden, your 1-year planning gets really easy. What do I need to be working on right now in order to get there? Once you know your 1-year plan, then it becomes very simple to answer the question, what have I got to be working on right now? Quarterly rocks. We'll talk about rocks in a little bit. So those are the 8 questions that make up vision in an EOS world. And once that vision exists, we want it to be shared by everyone. We're going to talk about some of the tools that we have in EOS and jump around a couple of the different components. Before we do, any questions about that vision component, those 8 questions that make up what we call the vision traction organizer? Core values, core focus, 10-year target, marketing strategy, 3-year picture, 1-year plan, and then quarterly rocks, commitments on a quarterly basis. Any questions at all about that? Very simple way to look at strategic planning. None? Okay, we'll push on. Here's some of the tools that we're going to talk about that are part of the EOS toolbox. And I share these with you in hopes that by the end of this presentation, 1 or more of these will be things that can be helpful for you when you take back to your business after the session today. We have an accountability chart, which is different from an organization chart, and I'll tell you why that is. There's a weekly scorecard. that we use to measure things. There's a specific meeting rhythm and cadence for your business. And then there's a process component to EOS. These are some of the ones that I'd like to introduce to you today. The first one is the accountability chart. You know, we all have in our business an organization chart, and that's not what this is. An accountability chart doesn't answer the question, who's your boss? An accountability chart answers the question, what are you responsible for? And so when we build this accountability chart, we start by asking, what's the right structure for my business? We don't look at the 10 people, the 15 people, the 100 people that work in our business and say, what does Jeff do? What does Alex do? What does Kay do? We forget people, and we ask ourselves, what's the right structure to take my business forward? What are the major functions in my business? And then without thinking about people in the business, what do I need those people to be accountable for? And so when you're building your accountability chart, you start by saying major functions. Okay, operations. I've got an operations function. You don't go, Jeff owns operations. What does Jeff do? Instead, you say, what do I need the operations person to be able to do? What do I need them to be responsible for? And so we're not being held back by the historic legacy people who are in our business. We're asking, what do I need people to be able to do going forward? And when we do that, we get these key responsibilities and functions in a single box. We make sure that there's only one name in every single box. We call it an accountability chart. Only one person is accountable. And when we do that, we can finally say, okay, this is what this person is responsible for. And we can ask this question to determine, is that person in the right seat? We can ask, number one, does this person get it? Number two, do they want it? And number three, do they have the capacity to do it? Let's break that down real quickly. When somebody gets a job, it simply means they're internally wired to do it. They inherently understand. Have you had employees before that you've told them 20 times how to do something, and the 21st time you ask them to do something, they come and they ask you again, the 21st time, how do I do it? When somebody doesn't get it, you know it. And so somebody needs to get the job. We think they need to want the job. It's not enough for somebody to come in, punch a clock, suffer through the day and go home and be miserable. You know, we think for somebody to be in the right seat, they need to get up in the morning and be excited about doing that job. They have to truly want to do it. And then finally, we ask the question, do they have the capacity to be successful in this role? Capacity can be a lot of things. It can be education, it can be training, it could be resources, it could be people, it can be budget. But those are the three questions when we ask, is somebody in the right seat? We simply want to know, do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity to do it? And if the answer to any of those is no, then you simply know where it is you need to be coaching those people. So that's the accountability chart. What are people accountable for? And are they in the right seat? Meaning, do they get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to be successful in that role? And once you know the answer to that, then you can answer, do I have the right people in the right seats? I use RPRS for that. The right people share your core values, and they consistently behave in a way that's consistent with them. They display those core values over and over. They're the right people for us. They're in the right seat if we've clearly defined the role that we need people to play, and they are in a seat that they get, want, and have the capacity to be successful in. So that's people in an EOS world. That's the accountability chart. And I wonder, has anybody in the group had people that, for whatever reason, you can't put your finger on it, but they just don't seem to click in their role, or they don't seem to click in your business? If you have, I'd encourage you to look back on your core values and look back on what people were responsible for, not their job description, but what they were responsible for. And chances are, if you have someone that you can think of that didn't fit, it's one of these two things. Either they didn't share the core values, or they didn't want, and have the capacity to do the job that you needed them to do. So that's the accountability chart tool. We look at what we call a scorecard. You probably measure lots of different things, been involved in lots of different businesses, and there's never a problem with, is there enough data? We're surrounded with data. Data is everywhere. But what we want to do with the data in an EOS scorecard is to predict the future. The scorecard is a predictive tool. And we don't want to have 100 numbers. We want to have a critical handful of numbers, 10 to 12 numbers, that answers the simple question, did we do the right things last week? And how do we know what the right things are? We think about the outcomes that we're looking for, and then we identify the inputs on a regular basis that are necessary to get there. What does that mean? Think about your sales team. If you're in a business that has salespeople, you know that to get a sale, before that happens, you have to make presentations. And before you make those presentations, you have to get meetings. And before you get those meetings, you have to put new people in the pipeline. And so working backwards from that outcome, which is a new customer, you can say, okay, we'll get enough new customers if we have 10 new prospects every week. Great. We're going to measure every single week, did we have 10 new prospects? That's the input this week for the future outcome that we're looking for. Sales is easy. It gets a little harder when you're talking about operations. When I ran a manufacturing company, one of the things that we measured on a weekly basis, we wanted to know, will we get future business from our customers? We were a very repeat business focused entity. And so we knew that if we kept today's customers happy, they'd be customers tomorrow. Well, how did we know that they were going to be happy? We measured, did the orders go out the door on time, correct, 99% of the time, on time, in full. And the reason we did that was not so that we could go bark at the production people. It was because that had predictive value about whether customers would come back. And so what we ask you to do with your scorecard is identify those key outputs that you're looking for, and then break down your processes so that you can measure something on a weekly basis that answers the question, am I going to get those outputs that I'm looking for? So that's the scorecard. How many of you have things that you measure on a weekly basis right now that are tied to your processes? Not your results, but your processes, the things that you do that are going to give you the future outcomes. Anybody? If not, I'll encourage you to think about that. Work backwards from the outcomes that you want so that you can measure your inputs on a weekly basis. When we talk about process in an EOS world, we're not talking about an ISO 9000 every single procedure in your business sort of operation. We're really looking for a Pareto explanation of what's that handful of key processes that we have, and do we know how we do it so people can follow that process? Think about it. Every business has a people process. How do we identify hiring needs, advertise, interview, hire, onboard, manage, and ultimately transition people? That's our people process. And all we ask you to do is to document that at a high level so that a competent professional, excuse me, can understand the way you want it done. Sean mentioned that I had spent some time as a national examiner for the Baldrige program, and it's a great program. But I can tell you that it looks at process very, very differently, very granularly. And what we want you to do, once again, EOS is all about simplicity, is just have that handful of key processes, your financial process. You'll have 2 or 3 operations process. You'll have a sales process. Make sure that it's documented so someone can sit down and look at it and see the way you want to do it. And once you've done that, which is the easy part, by the way, you can then move on to the next step, which is to make sure that people follow your processes. And that may sound like, well, of course, that's simple, but you'd be amazed how many companies have documented processes, but they don't audit them. They don't make sure that the people are actually doing it that way. And what they compromise with that is all the value that we're looking for in process, which is, are we going to increase our throughput? Are we going to continue to do things better and faster and cheaper and smarter and get the scale that we're looking for in process and get the consistency and the quality? So that's process in an EOS world, documenting that handful of key ones and then making sure people follow them. Nothing magic about that, nice and simple, but you'd be amazed how many businesses don't do it, don't have process manuals. There's a consistency to meetings when you're running on EOS. Sean can walk you through these because he's been through each and every one of them. There's, of course, an annual planning process. Every single quarter, the team gets back together and asks themselves, did we do what we committed to get done over the last quarter? There's an accountability component to it. And then there's a planning component to it. What are we going to do in the next quarter? What are the commitments that we're going to make over the next 90 days? And the way we make sure those happen is every single week, there's a meeting that we call a level 10 meeting where the team comes together and there's reporting, there's accountability, and there's issue solving. And we'll talk about issue solving in just a second. But a company that runs on EOS all meets the same way. Once a week, there are these level 10 meetings. Once a quarter, there are the quarterly planning meetings. And finally, each and every year, you come back together and you make new commitments. So that's the meeting pulse for an EOS company. We talked about rocks. And it's important for us to understand, what a rock is. You're going to find that the rocks get defined by lots of people differently. You'll hear people talk about, well, a rock is a goal, or a rock is something we're going to do. Here's what I teach. When we set rocks in our businesses, a company rock is one of the 3 to 7 most important commitments we make to achieve a specific thing by a specific date at the expense of other things because they're so impactful. And when you unpack that, there's an awful lot in there. A rock is not a goal. A goal is, I'm going to go out and break 90 when I play golf this weekend. That's a goal. Wouldn't it be nice if I shot 90 or better? A rock is a commitment. A rock is the collective leadership team saying, at the expense of other things, we're going to get this done this quarter. And it's all about focus. It's about making sure that when you make these big 10-year targets, when you have these big quarterly commitments, that you stay focused on them. And so when we set rocks, they're not goals, they're not targets, they're commitments. And we ask the leadership team, are you committed to get this done at the expense of other things? And you'd be amazed if you go back today and you have some planning time with your team. If you ask these 2 questions at the end of it, you will get better results, I promise. If you ask number 1, if you look the team in the eye and you say, are you committed to doing this? And then wait for them to answer the question. Yes. Yeah, I'm committed. Yes, we're committed. That's great. And then you ask them, can I count on you to get that done? And if they say yes, I'm here to tell you, I can predict the future. The chances of it happening are so much higher than if you just broke the huddle and you said, okay, let's go do this. We're making commitments. And when people make commitments, they get them fulfilled. And so what we're trying to do with rocks is on a 90-day basis, break our world down into digestible little chunks of things that people commit to getting done. And so instead of waking up 90 days later and finding out that they were too busy on just the day-to-day input of the business, they stayed focused on those important, critical commitments. And things actually happen. When we have a rock, when we call them rocks for a specific reason, Stephen Covey, great book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He tells a story about filling up a time bucket with those things that can consume your time. And he asks you to think about big rocks are the important things, and stones are the day-to-day things that you do, and sand is just the noise. And he tells this great story. It's ultimately designed to underscore the fact that if you stay focused on the most important things, you can get everything done. And so a quarterly rock will be those 90-day commitments that it's the incremental progress sometimes that you need to make on an annual goal. You'll break an annual goal down into quarterly components. Those get done. Sometimes a rock will be, we're going to solve this issue. We've got to, and then you'll fill in the blank. We've got to have a new ERP system. We've got to hire a new HR director, whatever it is. So those rocks will be either the progress you want to make against your goals or solving some critical issue. Those are rocks. And if on a 90-day basis, you've got your entire organization focused on just a few things, getting just a few things done, you'll be amazed at how many of them actually happen. We talked about a level 10 meeting, and we're going through, again, a few of the tools in the EOS Toolkit. Every EOS company has a weekly meeting where there's a team building component to it. There's a reporting and accountability component to it. And then finally, there's an issues solving component to it. If you're using EOS as a system, you're constantly keeping what we call an issues list. What are the things that we need to decide? What are the challenges that we have? What are the opportunities going forward? And those things get kept on this issues list. And every single week, rather than just thinking one of these days we're gonna talk about this, you have in your level 10 meeting 60 minutes that's designed to solve those issues. And I want you to understand the difference between IDS, which stands for identify, discuss, and solve, and just talking about something. When we go through the IDS process, we're looking for you to commit 60 intense minutes to resolving issues, and here's how we do it. We ask, first of all, what is truly the issue? Not what do we want to talk about, but when we identify an issue, here's how we ask it. We prioritize, we say, okay, the first issue we're going to talk about is number 11, which is the parking lot, for example. Somebody put parking lot on the issues list. Well, if you're in a meeting that's really ineffective, what you're about to do is spend who knows how long talking about the parking lot. And what we ask you to do is really different. We know somebody put it on the issues list. And we asked, okay, who put it on the issues list? Alex says, I put it on the issues list. Great. Alex, tell us in a sentence, what are we solving for? What does solved look like? And so instead of saying we're going to talk about the parking lot, Alex says, I put it on the issues list. I want to know when we're going to paint new stripes on the parking lot because they're starting to fade. One sentence. We know exactly what we're solving for. And if you can do nothing else, if you take nothing but this away from today, you can get hours of your lives back. How many meetings have you sat in where somebody says, okay, what are we going to talk about next? And before you know it, you've got 10 minutes of background that may or may not be relevant. And you don't even know why you're listening to this background because you don't know what you're solving for. So it starts like this. I put it on the issues list. Here's what I need. I'm going to say it in a sentence. I know exactly what solved looks like. Once you've done that, you can then go about discussing it the way we discuss it in EOS. It's not a conversation. It's an open and honest dialogue where everyone participates. Everyone has the right and the obligation to say exactly what they think one time, once. We don't go back and forth. We don't congratulate ourselves about what we said an hour ago that was so smart. We don't backtrack. Everybody says what they've got to say one time. And once there's nothing to add, It's time to solve it. What are we going to do? What's next? Who's going to own that? Who's going to be responsible for it? And so in an EOS discussion, if you're solving issues using IDS, what you do is you radically accelerate the process of getting to exactly what are we going to do from exactly what was the issue. And so instead of having conversations, we're going to talk about this and having these endless discussions, you spend 60 minutes putting a laser sharp focus on what we're solving for, getting to that solution as quickly as you can, and then moving on without any politicking, without any browbeating. So that's IDS. And when you solve it, you got to make sure everyone's on the same page. Are we all clear on the decision that we just made? Can this team support it? You may not agree with it, but you were heard. Can we support it? You break the huddle with the leadership team, knowing that everybody's on the same page. Here's the next step. And then the final bullet point here, how many times have you been in meetings and you just can't get to solve because people don't agree and reasonable people differ? Well, that happens all the time. You remember our accountability chart? On the accountability chart, we talked about responsibilities. Somebody in the room is going to have the responsibility of making a decision. And so if there isn't consensus, we know that somebody has the role where it's their job to make a decision. And so between IDS and the accountability chart, we've put you in a place where you can get to solved as quickly as possible, even if that means there's no consensus, because somebody has the responsibility to make a decision. So that's a very, very, very quick run through some of the components of the EOS model. And I was asked to have about 15 minutes left for questions if you have them. I went a little too fast. We now have 17 minutes. So sorry, we may have to burn a couple of extra minutes at the end, but don't feel obligated. I mean, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you don't have any questions, but if you do have questions, I'm happy to answer them. This is what I do. I help leadership teams implement this model in their businesses. And so if there's anything I can tell you, Sean is familiar with it. The bank runs on the EOS system. Sean, let me kind of kick it over to you real quickly. What's different at the bank as a result of you using EOS as your operating platform?
You know, first of all, thanks, Jeff. It's great information. I just sent a chat message, you know, that this has dramatically changed, I think, the course of our business. It's allowed us to become laser focused on what's important and not get distracted by the things that are not important to hitting our goals and objectives. And you know, it sounds very simple, but it takes a lot of strategy. It takes a lot of diligence to stay focused on those things that, as you mentioned, we backed into. What is it we want to accomplish? And so what is it we have to do now to get there? And the problem with every business and every business I've encountered, every business I've been a part of, is staying focused on those things and not allowing the outside distractions to take you away from those. And there is no shortage in my business, and I'm sure in the rest of the businesses on this call, there is no shortage of distractions that take our eye off the ball. So.
Yeah, it's funny. Sean mentions that. I come in on a quarterly basis working with teams. A quarter ago, we set rocks. Rocks are commitments. Remember, a rock is a commitment to get something done at the expense of something else. And we'll walk through each and every one of these rocks. Okay, Bobby, you were going to do A, B, C, D, and E. Was that done or not done? And Bobby will tell us done or not done. Liza would have had one, done or not done, and she'll tell us. And at the end, some of the rocks get done, some of them don't the first time around. And so I asked the question, okay, these rocks that didn't get done, why didn't they get done? And what do you think is the number one answer? I didn't have time. I didn't have time. And so you fill in the blank. Let's finish that sentence. I didn't have time to complete the most important commitments I made to achieve specific things at the expense of other things. You know, just like Sean said, life happens to us. And people get accustomed to, well, I'm going to set these goals. Wouldn't it be nice if I got this done? And before you know it, the email inbox is full and the phone is ringing and all these other things are happening. And they don't make that time to get that commitment done. And so Sean's right. It's all, the rocks are designed to get us focused at the expense of other things on those critical few. So that's a great point. There was another question Paul asked, does EOS work for small size companies? The tools are effective no matter what size your business is. You may not have a full-blown leadership team, but I can tell you that you're going to get real value from measuring the important inputs on a weekly basis, or making sure that you've got people who are working in roles where they can be successful, or that you're solving issues as they come up. The typical company that implements EOS with someone like me, an implementer, usually has a leadership team. But there are companies that implement EOS without an implementer. They grab a copy of the book Traction and they go to work. And that's where you can find the book is Traction. The other thing that small businesses will do, Paul, is there is on the EOS website, I think it's eosworldwide.com. There's a tool that you can subscribe to called Basecamp. And Basecamp is essentially a learning and execution environment for people who want to self-implement EOS without working with someone like me. And so Basecamp would be something else you could look at. That's eosworldwide.com, and then just look at Basecamp. So those are two things that smaller companies can do. Any other questions? Don't see anything else in the chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much,
Sure.
Jeff. This was amazing. This was really valuable information. And as my email confirmation said, we are recording this, so we will have this available to you on our website, and I will also send it out to everybody who was registered for the event. But yeah, really quick, we're gonna do a poll about the event, just one question, and you can just answer that really quickly as I go through some of the chamber reminders that we have. All right, so just a few reminders. The next Bold Speaker Series will be on June 22nd, and that will be Tom Salter, who is actually attending this event today. He'll be our speaker to talk about social media analytics for small businesses. Also, make sure you look at all of our emails. We are transitioning to hybrid events. So if you have any questions about that, how we will do some in person, some in Zoom, but just make sure that you look through our emails to see what events will be on which platform. And then also on June 28th, we'll be hosting the Spark event. That will be from 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. and it will be the State of the City address. So if you're interested, please go to our website, that is garlandchamber.com, for more information. Thank you everybody for answering our poll here. Awesome. Yeah, we have ended today's event. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you to our partners, Sean Cass, Texas Security Bank, for always being our partners for this and helping our small businesses. And everybody have a nice day. Thank you so much.